Welcome to Signs of the Times. I'm Dr. Willard Register, and I'm happy to tell you Dr. Noyes is with us again this week. Dr. Noyes is also a retired physician, as am I, but he got interested in studying some other types of modalities that's going on in the world today, and in the medical world, I might add. But he got to thinking maybe everything is not just like it ought to be. And so as he studied year after year, he thought, I'm going to write a book. So he wrote a book to tell you, and the name of the book is Exposing Spiritualistic Practices in Healing. I'm going to talk about this book a little at the end of this program. But today, Dr. Noyes is going to tell me about something that is widely accepted and even believed. So is it good or is it bad? Acupuncture. Dr. Noyes, tell us.
It's interesting. I went through 4 years of medical school, internship, and been in practice for a number of years. I had not heard the subject of acupuncture. I was not taught anything about it in medical school. Now, Nixon took a trip to China, 1971. When he came back, the reporters reported about some surgery that went on. One of the Americans went over, had an appendicitis, had to be operated on, and how they were doing anesthesia by using acupuncture. That was brand new. And all across the country, doctors had people coming in saying, what about this? I didn't know what to tell them. I'd asked other doctors and they knew less than I knew, which was nothing. There were some opinions. I had my own opinion. I felt it was probably hypnosis. But this went on, and for 20 years I wrestled with this. 20 years. Finally I says to myself, oh, there must be something that we just haven't been able to show the true physiology changes with this, blocking a nerve pattern or something. You know, it was common, bannered about in medicine that you're doing a block that keeps a gate block for nerve impulses. Well, it made sort of sense, but it still didn't satisfy me. And eventually I came to enough knowledge by searching deeper into research to have an idea of its background, what it really was. And so let's look today a little bit at this. I've been in China a couple times for an extended period of time. And in visiting the hospitals, I'd run into medical students from Europe. And they're there to study acupuncture, study the traditional Chinese medicine. And this Chinese medicine is actually based in Taoism. It goes back centuries, millennia, 3 millennia or more. And acupuncture, martial arts, like versus like, Chinese traditional medicine, all based upon that which we've been talking about the previous sessions, balancing an energy. For those that tuned in, have not heard the others, we're talking about our creation, according to this story, of a great energy throughout the cosmos, had two sides to it. It blended just right, and when it got the right blend, it created the cosmos, all the material things of the cosmos, earth and man. And that energy that had the two sides is the center of our interest in these particular modalities for healing, because it's that energy, they tell us, because life came from balancing it. When we're sick, we have an imbalance. And if we can correct the balance, that is to bring us back into health. That's kind of where we are. So Taoism says there are 3 basics to it. Man is the microcosm. He's the image of the universe. Every bit of the knowledge that's ever existed also exists in man. And the creative principle in Chinese is called qi. That energy we've talked about is qi. It has the two sides. And there was a period of transition where it moved from one component to another, the basic elements, metal, water, wood, fire, earth. These were the methods or the periods of transition that it talks about. It doesn't have English words that really tell us the real thing. So as we proceed, we still learn that man is the microcosm. He has everything within him in intelligence, power, creative, that the universe has. That's a different way of thinking. Remember, for any of those people that are new listening, I am relating this as a Judeo-Christian, my viewpoint, my worldview. I'm looking and relating this subject as I have learned and understood it from that viewpoint. So others may have a different viewpoint, but you'll understand me better when you realize that particular part.
Explain that picture that's on the screen right now, the person that's
thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
I've seen it in book after book after book.
You see it where they talk about holistic health.
Right.
Where all the body, mind, spirit. And that is a representative of that creation, where the energy came together just right and blended. The outer circle is the cosmos. The inner circle is man, is the earth. And then man standing in it. Man is the microcosm. Everything that goes on in the universe is in man, according to this theory.
Right.
And so that is an emblem that stands for the false creation, in my judgment, a false story of creation. But that's an emblem saying, here is what we believe in, this holistic of man connected with this universe, on that part.
Okay.
Yes. And so here we have a picture of a young lady, my daughter, looking at the cosmos, in a sense, saying, everything in that cosmos is within my own body. And the wisdom, the knowledge, power, everything. And so we have this picture we're showing now that shows the connection. Out of there, the sympathy, the correspondence, everything. This is the basis of a zodiac, saying what the planets do affects my life, my body. And it comes from this theory.
So that's why I should check them every morning, right?
Yeah, yeah. And if they don't work out well, too bad.
Too bad.
Too bad. But that's the basis of it. And it is also the foundation for the nature worship, pagan religions, because everything is God. It's made of the same energy, therefore it's God. Energy is God, separated from what we believe a living being as a creator God.
But somewhere they've got to have a supernatural being, don't they?
They don't. We do.
Yeah, but I mean, they name it God because
yes.
they got to have a God.
Yes, there's that type of thing, yes, on there. But this, and so in the Chinese traditional medicine, this sympathy, correspondence, association is a powerful thing, because part of their healing mechanisms are involved in that without necessarily putting a needle in and so forth. Let's look at some of those to give a little idea. They say a walnut looks like a brain.
Yeah,
okay? You eat a walnut, it's good for the brain. And we know now that
it is.
The omega-3s are in the walnut, and those are good for the brain. So,
right.
Boy, those need-eaters run with that fact like you can't believe.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Okay, then something else. You want your child to grow with a straight spine, and so you eat pig's tails. In China, the pig's tails are straight. So you eat a pig's tail, and that, by association, is going to give you a straight spine. Yes. I'm not a child. I'm not sure about in our age whether that's going to help anyone.
Well, my mother used to say, "Stand up straight" to me, and so she should have had some pigtails to feed me.
Taking a piece of a tiger's heart will give you courage.
Really?
And that's, some of these odd things made certain animals a little more extinct. Aphrodisiac, the sex stimulants, is to eat a part of a horn. That's why the rhino horn is taken as so expensive. I have friends that sell horns to the Orient, make good money selling deer horns. These are ground up and used in various ways.
I've been all through the East, and I saw these horns ground up for sale every place.
That's the aphrodisiac.
Yep.
Yeah, sex stimulant, supposedly.
Yeah, exactly.
Science hasn't found them. But again, we have in this Chinese traditional medicine, we have the concept of balancing the energy, the yin and the yang, they call it.
Now, is this something I've noticed when an Oriental comes in? I sold a house to an Oriental, my house, but the yin and the yang had to be just so, or they weren't. Tell us.
The furniture needs to be just right. The food that's on the table, everything. I don't know it in detail, but I know the whole lifestyle. Everything is to keep a balance, a belief in this balance.
Right.
On that score. Well, we believe in a balance too, but usually on a biochemical basis.
Right.
It's a little different than their...
We have the pyramid for nutrition.
Yes.
We have the, which is supposed to give us balance.
So we believe in a biochemical balance so that we have the right amount of magnesium and sodium and potassium and these things in our body. We're talking a balance of something different here. We're talking a balance of this so-called universal energy.
Something kind of ethereal here. I can't get my hands on it.
Yes. And so let's take a look here. I have a slide that gives us a picture of several of the Chinese traditional methods of balancing energy. And some of these are going to surprise people. The most harmless of all that you could believe, Tai Chi.
Tai Chi
is a energy balancing technique. This smooth movements of exercise.
Oh, we see them on TV.
Yeah, that's out of martial arts. Martial arts was the earliest. The history in the books on this tells us that martial arts had the earliest start of any of this traditional Chinese medicine.
Now, exercise, I'm always in favor of exercise.
That's great.
They must have something more in mind than just exercise here.
Yes.
Is that true?
Right, and we'll get to that in a moment, but that is very true. So you see the martial arts there. The Tai Chi is a part of martial arts.
Right.
Herbs, that's a big part. The balancing the yin-yang, yes. And they have meditation. That's important here. It's a little different on some parts than the Hindu, but basically the same, and with the same purpose in mind, balancing energy well enough that eventually you can join the spirit world.
Oh, really?
Same exact.
So we can make it to heaven, according to their...
Yeah, the spirit heaven. And that's the object of balancing the energy within the body with these martial arts, with the acupuncture, all of these things, is the object to get out of this miserable life and get into paradise.
Right.
And to realize that this is the background of this.
Now, the doctor, one day, a friend of mine, and he's still a friend, actually, but I had pain in my leg, and he said, hey, come to the hotel room, come on up, and I've got some things I can help you with. Well, I didn't know his modalities, so I went with him, and he got out the needles, and I allowed him to start poking my leg. So what is, now, he's an MD.
Yeah.
Now, what is his thinking?
We'll move on here and get to your point here in just a moment. But knowing that first here as we look at the Qigong, which is meditation in action. Meditation. Now, you may do it where you just stand motionless, and that's meditation, like we talked about Hindu meditation last time. Here's Chinese meditation with the same purpose in mind, balancing energy to the point that they can join the spirit world. Or it may be meditation in motion. We have Tai Chi, which is a similar thing on the same basic purpose. So behind it there is spiritual roots. And my books that I read and get this from, which are promoting this, saying it's always spiritual, always spiritual, spirituality. You cannot separate it. We in this country say, oh, we won't deal with any of the spiritual part. That may be your desire. But they tell us it doesn't work quite well that way. It still brings some of that with it, the spirituality that you don't have control, whether you want it or not. Now, you ask about this putting needles in. Their idea is that the energy is spread through my body through these meridians, come down through certain channels. And that when the energy is out of balance, we can put a needle in here and it'll make that energy balance, and the organs in that area then will get sufficient energy. Now, scientifically, we don't find any of this so. We don't find the energy, we don't find the meridians, we don't find the points. Right. Now, some of the New Age people in that are in science will say, yes, we've proven they're there, but the rest of the scientists say, we don't find it. Right. To realize this, all of it based in astrology.
Now, I find that I've read some place, I've seen it, where the ear represents the whole body. So the certain parts of the ear is the heart, certain parts of the ear is the foot, certain part is the spleen, on the other side of the ear is the liver. So how do they work that?
All right, that's right next. Let's take a look at what's written here in front of you. Okay. This is talking about Qigong, that you can do it in such a manner that you don't need the acupuncture. It will accomplish the same thing simply by the physical motion of Qigong.
Really? Now, Qigong is a
it's
motion?
part of the balancing. Is all of these martial arts are out of Qigong.
Okay.
That is the foundation one that karate, judo, all of these come out of that. But we're all spiritual, spirituality as it starts. Now, you ask about the localized spots.
Yes, I do.
Actually, I have a magazine that tells me they supposedly found 18 places, spots. This ear will represent the whole body. It's called auricular therapy when you do acupuncture. The web in this area, maybe a tooth, the tongue, the hands.
Or the foot.
The feet, yes. And out of that, really, eventually, a doctor started what we call reflexology. We'll get to that another day, another week. But so they have a number of these called holograms, localized body zones, that are supposed to represent the entire body. And that's where putting a needle in those areas, you don't necessarily have to go to the entire body. You can take the ear, and it's like an embryo upside down, called auriculotherapy. What's interesting, there's two basic groups in the world, and they have different points on the ear, these two groups, for their auricular therapy. So they don't necessarily agree with one another on their... all right, now, acupuncture, you ask about it. Let's go back a little bit in our picture here. The National Institute of Health studied this. And they said a few years ago, we find it good for 3-4 things. And you see there for nausea, chemotherapy, minor pain relief. And so everybody that believed in it was really happy. Now, there have been hundreds of studies, but there's been a change. These studies didn't have a placebo to do a double-blind scientific study. Now that they have found and invented a placebo, then they had a study that we're looking at here. This is last year in the New England Journal of Medicine, telling about 6,359 patients that were followed over years that had acupuncture for low back pain. The synopsis of it is, now with this placebo, they find that those that get a placebo get the same effect as those that have the acupuncture.
But how do they have a placebo? Because I know whether I'm being stuck with a needle or not. And this is sham
procedure.
Yeah. How does that work?
Well, they will put it in different locations if they do put a needle, or they might just take a toothpick and touch the skin, or do something that the person thinks that has happened, but it has not happened.
Oh, okay.
And they find that they get equal results with the sham procedure as they do with the needle.
Yeah, I like that double-blind study.
Yeah, and so the groups that did this were people in medical schools promoting this very integrated medicine. But now they say, wow, we better study the psycho part, that this is more of a psycho technique than it is a reality. And so they had to make some changes on there, and they put a disclaimer on the internet, and this is what the disclaimer says. This statement, speaking of the first one that it worked on certain things, this statement is more than 5 years old, is provided solely for historical purposes. Due to the cumulative nature of medical research, new knowledge has inevitably accumulated in this subject area. Thus, some of the material is likely to be out of date, and at worst, simply wrong. So at this point, this disclaimer does away with that previous...
They're backing off.
They're backing off. As I mentioned, the National Institute of Health has spent $2 billion, spent 10 years researching these variety of treatments, and have come up with zero of their benefit.
Zero positive findings.
They have found nothing on that part.
Interesting.
Yes, on that part. All right. We come now, that sort of goes through, and I want you to ask me the questions that have come to your mind during this time.
Well, I have read stories, and you have too, about gallbladder surgeries and other invasive surgeries that are being done. You alluded to it, the anesthesia, where they're doing it without anesthesia, and it's pain-free. You know, I don't know that you have the answer for that, but I do.
Okay.
This is spiritualism, pure and simple.
All right.
And it shows us what kind of a mind we're dealing with. The original deceiver, the devil himself.
Right. This is my belief. Going back in the history of Hindu medicine and the yoga and the meditation and hypnotism, in India there was a doctor that did 160 some surgeries pain-free using hypnotism. Now when he came back to Scotland to do it in Scotland, didn't work out too well with the Scots. It took an individual that was deep into the occult doing the hypnotism, and took a person willing to accept it. And this, if we're looking at acupuncture as an anesthetic, it takes somebody that's connected tightly to the occult, and the person must give their will to accept it. Now, it hasn't worked out too well, and if you go research, you'll find they don't really use it outward as much there. There may be added to the other surgeries. There may be medicines given and so forth. There was a little bit of hype above and beyond, but there has been some. To me, it's my understanding as I've studied this, it's a form of hypnosis.
Right.
Same power.
Exactly. Now I see in your book, I see a lot of things, but tell me about holograms. How does that fit into this?
A hologram would be a small area that represents a vast area. And so that they feel that in this philosophy we've been presenting, that even one cell will represent the universe.
Like the ear represents the body?
It represents the body. And in between here, on a tooth, on the tongue, as I mentioned, there were 18 different spots on this New Age journal that I was reading that was talking about these holograms representing the whole. And that's why a person may take a hand or a certain thing and certain area of the body and apply the needles there, where otherwise if you take the whole area, they would go somewhat near that anatomical area.
Right.
But this part is
so
a part.
They've got now, don't they? So it's just pressure. They can use just the pressure. If I'm the doctor,
in acupuncture, you can shine a light on. It'll do. They tell me, I've not done these. I want everybody to know that I'm not in it.
Oh yeah.
But as I read those writing about it that have done it, shining a light on, doing a pressure, it's called acupressure. They used to burn a little mugwort, a little plant, and set it on fire and burn it on those spots.
Right. I know I saw on China some of the scars on the backs.
On there, yes. And so we have that type of thing in the background on there, using a localized spot. And from there spun off some of these other things like reflexology and so forth, where you just massage a hand or the foot. And they feel that many people don't connect it. But way in the background, most of these 4,000 more therapies, one has one, the next guy comes along, he changes it a little bit, and you have another one, he puts his name to it. That's why there's so many. They're really not one of them. In my understanding, as I've studied here, do we have proof that any one of them really of themselves do something?
So some people, and I know a doctor, or not a doctor, I know some people, housewives, get into this, and they say, come over, and I will just transfer some energy from me to you. Now, how does that work?
That's getting ahead of some lectures following weeks.
Oh, okay.
We'll be dealing with reflexology and other aspects of that. So we have those things to cover, and we will be looking at that because it's very popular, very widespread usage. Well, divination, some of it is in divination, applied kinesiology, and so forth.
Now, you've used divination several times and in different senses. So
the word,
it must have a wide...
It's used in a vast arena of medical activity.
Okay.
And it comes in so many forms that many people don't realize it. Iridology, applied kinesiology. And we'll get into those in a little more detail at later weeks.
Divination, has that got something to do with, well, I see here dowsing and divination. Are those synonyms? Or dowsing, all dowsing?
Dowsing is a little more particular.
I see.
It fits into divination.
Okay, so one is specific and one is generic.
Yes. That one covers the whole field and one is a specific act.
Okay.
A type of act. And those we have a lecture on that.
I want to talk to the viewers about this book in the last few moments. Now, you've heard a lot of things, and you still have a couple of weeks with us, Dr. Noyes, whether you've realized that or not. You're not going home yet. And so I know you can't remember everything. I know you think you can. Oh, I've got that down cold. But you don't. You know, it's been shown that in a couple of weeks you will have lost 80% of what you've heard. So buy the book. You need to buy the book. Because listen, we've only touched on just a minuscule of the subjects covered in this book. It's more than worth the money, because any one of these things may be worth the price of the book, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens. So now, I think that we're going to have on the screen your email. Is that?
It'll be email, and I have a website. You can purchase it through the website, well, PayPal. And I have an email, and they can phone me. If a person doesn't have a computer and is not computer literate, you know, many people don't have one. They can phone me.
Okay, so what I'm stressing here is get a hold of the book, one way or another. I suppose, does Amazon.com have this?
Yes.
Amazon.com. Exposing Spiritualistic Practices in Healing.
It's also on Kindle.
So get a hold. It's also on Kindle, he says. I don't know about that electronic stuff. Let's close with a word of prayer. Our dear Father in heaven, we thank you that you're enlightening us on the venues that the enemy of our soul will use to deceive us. Guide us as we strive to understand more deeply these things. Now be with each one of our viewers, that day by day they will realize and strive through the power of the Holy Spirit in their life to discover right versus wrong. Guide us to that end, we pray in Christ's name. Amen.